Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, has sold 5 million copies in English, and it's been translated into 36 other languages. So you might know what your love language is, but do you know how to put it into practice? Let's take a look at a few examples.
A woman encounters a homeless man. He's a Hurricane Katrina survivor, has HIV, and advanced lung cancer. She finds herself in a very unusual love story. Another woman has been married to her husband for several years. She's annoyed with his habit of drinking chocolate milk with a spoon. Little does she know, this irritation would help save her marriage. A 4-year-old wanders into a neighbor's backyard. This surprise visit later turns into a lifelong friendship. What do these true stories all have in common? According to best-selling author Gary Chapman, the blueprint for greater intimacy and stability in all your relationships.
Please welcome back to the 700 Club the author of Love is a Verb, Gary Chapman. Gary, great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Terry. Always good to be with you.
Well, I love the book. I sat at home last night chuckling and wiping a tear here and there as I read it. It's very inspiring. But before we talk about this new book, talk about the 5 love languages for people who either haven't read your first book or need a refresher on all of that.
Well, you know, Terry, the basic idea in that book was that what makes one person feel loved doesn't make another person feel loved.
It's really true.
So couples miss each other even though they're sincere. So I discovered after about 12 years of counseling that there was fundamentally 5 ways that we express love emotionally. Words of affirmation, acts of service, gifts, quality time, and physical touch. And each of us has a primary love language.
So you might like some of the secondary as well, but there's one that's the key thing that sort of feeds your soul.
Really speaks to your heart. And seldom does a husband and wife have the same language.
That's dangerous.
And we tend to speak our own language.
Yes.
So if physical touch makes me feel loved, I tend to hug my wife and kiss her, and she says, "Leave me alone. Can't you see I'm busy?"
So it's really important to know what your spouse's love language is, but also your children.
Yes, your children. So I've done a whole series on that, you know, one for couples and one for parents of children, parents of teenagers, and then single adults, and even one on God. God speaks your love language.
Wow. Now, why did you decide to do this sequel, Love is a Verb? I love the title.
I like the title, too, because it is. You know, It doesn't start with a feeling. It starts with an attitude. How can I help someone? And then you do it, and the behavior is an expression of love. You know, I just felt like, and still feel like, that there's thousands of stories out there where love has made a tremendous impact on people's lives. And I just wanted to collect some of those stories and share them with people. And so this book is a collection of real-life stories in many different areas of how love makes an impact and changes people's lives.
Well, and you talk about so many different kinds of relationships in the book. I mean, certainly there are a lot of stories on marriage, which you would expect in a book on love, and there are stories about parent-child relationships, but you have a story about, we mentioned it in that little clip that we showed, the homeless man who had been a victim of a hurricane, but also had a body that was victim to illness. Talk about that story.
Yeah, this lady encountered this man in her husband's office. He had come for veterans to find out if he had qualified for veterans help, and he didn't. And her husband told him about the man, told her about the man, HIV, and so he had just gotten an apartment, a subsidized apartment, but he had no furniture. Wow. And she said, that night, God just told me, you get him a bed. So she said, we went out and bought him a bed, brand new bed and mattress. She said, when we took it over there, he just wept. And then she said, my sister got in on the act and decided to get furniture. And she said, let's buy new furniture. So the name of the story is Loving Lavishly, you know, and so we bought him all new furniture. And then we helped him get linked up with medical care. Later on, we found out he had family. We encouraged him to call his family. And in time, what happened, his sister came to visit. In fact, they paid the airfare for her to visit. And she said, you know, God has told me I'm to take my brother home and to care for him because he also had lung cancer.
Yes.
And so she took him home, back with his mother, reunited with his 2 daughters. She didn't even know he was even married, but he had 2 daughters. And so the last few months of his life, he was able to spend with his family.
You know what jumped out at me about that story was when one woman did the right thing and moved forward, all these people around her lined up behind her and started participating and giving too. I mean, one person really can make a difference.
Absolutely. You know, when I read the story, I thought, what if, let's just take, not every Christian, let's just say every church adopted one homeless person. Imagine what would happen around the country.
It would be remarkable.
You know? It's just
really
powerful.
And then there's the story of the guy with the hot chocolate and the spoon. I laughed when I read that story because those of us who've been married for a while know that we all discover both sides of the fence, all the things that we begin to do that annoy each other.
Yeah.
But that story really is a blessing for a married couple to read. Talk about that.
It is, because what she said was, you know, he would stir his chocolate milk and eat it with a spoon.
Slurping and clinking.
And his rationale was, look, if I do it with a spoon, I'll only eat one glass, but if I drink it, you know, I'll drink 3 glasses. And he was already
he was already overweight. Right.
But she said that wasn't the only problem in their marriage. She said, you know, he criticized me. He never gave me any words of affirmation. She said, really, I'd lost all my feelings of love for him. I was just, it was 11 years into the marriage. And she said, I just sat down and I thought, you know, what are the things that irritate me about him? And she said, I wrote them down, and there was only 5. And I tried to think of more, and I could only think of 5 that irritated me. And then she said, I made a list of the things I liked about him. And it was a much longer list, you know. He had a real sense of humor. He supported the family, on and on and on, you know. And then she said, I thought, well, what about me? And she said, I wrote down what I consider to be my weak areas as a wife. And she said it was pretty long. And said, in fact, I wondered, why did he marry me? I'm not much of a catch. And then she said, I wrote down the things that were positive about me. And she said it wasn't too long, really.
A little shorter list.
But she said, I made a fundamental decision. I took that paper of his faults, and I crumbled it and threw it in the fire. I didn't say a word to him. But for me, it was an act of, I'm not going to focus on those things. I'm going to focus on the things I like about him. And she said, I took that paper, and I read 3 times a day. I would read it for a week, the things I liked about him. And she said, then every week after that, I would read it once a week. And she said, I kept it with me for years. And she said, when I started focusing on the things I liked about him, my behavior toward him changed. And then his behavior toward me changed. And she said the whole thing was reborn.
And she fell in love with him all over again. It was a precious story.
It was powerful.
It's one of many powerful stories. We don't have time to go into some of the others, but trust me when I tell you this is a book that will bless you. It's called Love is a Verb. It is available wherever books are sold, and I know that you'll enjoy reading it. It's something all of us need to read and take a look at the relationships in our lives where we have an opportunity to love someone and love them well. Thank you so much, Gary. It's great to see you again.
Thank you,
God
Terry.
bless you.
Good to be with you.